just saw there is called a fleche, and a lot of people use that move in their fencing. Me, I'm not so much a fan of that, but that doesn't mean that I don't have an equivalent explosive maneuver that I use that I call the jump lunge. And today, I'm going to talk to you about that. But first, some well-deserved recognition for my Patreon supporters. As a reminder, subscription to the Patreon channel, Castle and Sword, gives you access to exclusive video content and deep dives on the tactics, strategies, and techniques like the one I'm about to discuss with you now, but at a much greater and deeper level than the public YouTube channel is going to give you. Further, subscription to the Patreon channel Castle and Sword will also give you access to exclusive video updates on the progress of Tiger Castle, and it gives you a host of other benefits as well. So please, click the link below, subscribe today, and we'll see you there. When I first started learning fencing 34 years ago, I was just 17 years old. Back then, it was Olympic-style fencing of foil and saber that I was taught, and as a part of that training, I learned the fleche as a means of long-range attack against my opponents. Now back then, it actually was a fairly effective means of closing the distance with your opponent and having at least a shot at making the touch. But the problem from a martial context is that it brings your body right up to your opponent. Now in a sporting context, that's perfectly fine. If you're not familiar, in Olympic-style fencing, you have to have right-of-way in order to be able to make the touch. And your opponent has no choice but to parry before they can strike in return. This makes for a very safe option and no real consequence for bringing your body up close to your opponent. But as I mentioned, in a martial context, this is not acceptable because unless you happen to hit that magic off switch in your opponent's head, you have now brought your body right up to your opponent and they have the opportunity to take you with them, whether it's with a dagger or just a simple follow-on strike. The pros of the fleche are that it will cover a lot of ground and it gives you an opportunity to strike your opponent from a fairly long distance away. However, it is fraught with flaws in my opinion because by bringing your body that close to your opponent, you no longer have the room in order to maneuver your own weapon. Neither can your opponent for that matter. And oftentimes the exchange turns into, well, something like this. All too often I have seen exchanges like that play out exactly like that when they're using the fleche. And let's face it, in a competitive sense, there is no real consequence for bringing your body that close to your opponent, which is why I think so many people are willing to use it in their competition HEMA fencing. But having that kind of a flaw in that system, it just goes against the very grain of the way that I fence. I try as much as possible to incorporate the martial context at all times. And for that reason, I came up with a similar type move that is kind of a combination of a balestra and a fleche, but doesn't end up with me bringing my body so close to my opponent that I end up having to exchange blows with my opponent because we're both scrambling now with so much less distance between us. And that move is something I call the jump lunge. So the important thing to remember when you're performing the jump lunge is that you have to have the right distance between you and your opponent. If you're too far away, then your opponent is easily able to defend themselves. And if you're too close, then it basically turns into a whole lot of blades slinging around because neither one of you has got the room in order to effectively make your attacks. And it turns awful. It makes it very difficult for the judges in a HEMA context to see it, so don't do it. We're going to look at this from the martial perspective. You only need to bury 3 to 4 inches of your blade in your opponent for it to be a martial strike, for it to have been, in a real duel, a lethal blow. So that distance is going to be key to being able to do that. Now, unlike the fleche that starts from much farther away and it's a running attack that takes several steps, this jump lunge is wickedly quick. Now, from this distance is about the range that I would utilize that jump lunge against my opponent. It is such that even a moderately skilled swordsman is going to be able to see, I can't reach him with an extension of the sword, I can't reach him on the lunge, but what they don't understand, what they don't realize in that critical moment is that a jump lunge will carry me easily the distance I need to go to, and it is quick. So, to show you what I'm talking about, Lynn will have her sword up to the side. Now right now, as you have seen, I can't reach her on an extension, I can't reach her with my full-on lunge, but when I do a jump lunge, I am easily able to get that sword past her head, and critical is that I do not follow through running past my opponent, closing the distance. That just opens me up to being knifed either with their dagger, possibly with their sword. So when I make that jump lunge, I do so in such fashion that I land my balance on that front leg and I don't proceed any further. So that way, I'm able to push myself right back out again. I don't get close to the weapons, I don't endanger myself, and to be quite honest, if you want to do it from a martial perspective, you want that distance to always exist between you and your opponent. If you close to the grapple or you crash into your opponent, you introduce variables that are just not acceptable for a masterful strike. The jump lunge itself is actually something that gives you all the advantages of a fleche attack, meaning it will cover ground, but it will cover ground quickly, and it will leave you in a position that you can defend yourself because of the fact that that distance between you and your opponent still exists. So I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you have questions, you can reach out to me on YouTube, you can reach out to me on Facebook, but also as a reminder, you get access to exclusive content on my Patreon channel to include much greater in-depth discussions and explanations of the techniques like you just saw here. So please reach out there, support Castle and Sword, and we'll see you on the tournament circuit.